Ah,
Let's see. Once YouTube, there's always this moment of, are we actually live? And then YouTube
right.
maybe tells us that we are actually live. And now there's feedback with YouTube saying that we are actually live. So welcome everyone to, I didn't change I blew it. I think this is episode 8 because it says episode 7 and I didn't do anything with it. So it's
That would make sense.
it's probably episode 8. And now it should say episode 8. Assuming I have everything else set correctly. I don't know. For some reason, the live stream stuff is just a little bit trickier than I'd like on YouTube. And I feel like that is proof from like watching other people do live streams, like actual like YouTube people, and they always like are staring into the camera at the beginning and just like, I think we're live? I think we're live.
Are we live?
You know.
Yeah,
So, but
it's
yes,
always so weird.
we should be live at this moment in time, I believe.
Nice.
So welcome everybody to Low Brass U Studio Class episode 8. If I think I have everything correct, which I may not. No one really knows, and we can welcome our esteemed colleague, Mr. Connor Eisenmenger.
Ooh, esteemed colleague.
Who is being accompanied by trumpet and trumpet student today.
Yes, there is some trumpet learning going on in the domicile that I am currently in.
Right.
So we will enjoy some learning.
Right. So if anyone wants to do some lip slurs with the trumpets that you hear, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, drop me a message. We'll get you plugged in.
Right. So, just as people start to trickle in a little bit, we've got a couple of topics that we might cover just a little bit. The first of which, do you want to talk about your exciting counterweight story?
Yeah, I've got some news on the Edwards trombone front. I have added a counterweight to my trombone as of today. It came in the mail sometime while I was gone the past couple of days, and I found it last night in the mailbox. And so yeah, I gave it a try today, and the reason that I put a counterweight on my trombone was because there wasn't one at all. And for those of you keeping score at home, the counterweight is like that little metal circle on the back of your trombone. It's usually like on like a little metal brace on your like tuning slide crook or somewhere back there, pretty close. And essentially what it does is like the bell of your trombone is really, really big, and the slide of your trombone is really, really long.
Yeah, never mind. Sorry.
There's lots of metal, and it's heavy. And if you don't put a counterweight on it, like 17-year-old Zach didn't, then sometimes it like makes the trombone like.
So this is counterweight shaming me for giving you or selling you a trombone and not having a counterweight on it.
not to be picky. No, it was fine actually.
Says the
really
person who
who
has multiple broken braces on that trombone.
Not multiple, just one.
Just one, and
Just
that's
one.
going on what, year 4?
Probably, yeah. I need to get that resoldered pretty soon. So,
throwing a lot of stones in the glass house.
In the gas house.
In the gas house.
But yeah, so no, but it's cool, and it wasn't really like remarkably front heavy to the point where it was a problem, but it was always something that I wanted to try out. And so I put it on today. It's really easy. If you buy one, I got mine from Hickey's Music, and I'm not like, this is not a sponsored.
They're definitely paying us so much money. It's
yeah.
It's crazy how much money they're giving us right now just to bring up their name.
It's truly unreal. But it's a reasonable price. They're a good manufacturer, and they sell lots of like generic parts for trombone things if you ever like are curious about like adding anything on aftermarket. And so I tried it out today. It's really easy. You just like take a screwdriver and put it on. I don't know if it's helped it or not. Like, it feels better to hold it in my hand, but the fact of the matter is I didn't play my trombone for like 36 hours. So like playing was weird in general. So I'll have to report back later about whether it actually like, I don't know if it's going to make me sound better or worse, but as far as holding the trombone in my hand, it felt more balanced. So that was cool.
And this isn't, I mean, I guess not to speak for you, but you're kind of splitting your time between multiple trombones at this point. How much playing of the Edwards is that your main character right now? Is that your Kirby?
Yeah, I would say my main right now is definitely the Edwards, and that's probably getting like 85% of my time.
Gotcha.
So I would say it's a considerable amount. The King is not getting a lot of airtime. The Bach 42 probably should get more than it is. I should do some tones and some slurs maybe on that one.
Tones for Jones Bones.
There you go.
But hello, Logan Johnson. Hope you're doing well.
Peace and love.
Are we asking if we're going to play Among Us today? I don't think we are going to. We'll do that for the 1 million subscriber Low Brass U.
Absolutely.
How about that? Hold me to it, because if that day ever comes, and it probably won't, and I accept that. But Justin Bieber did tell us, never say never. So, but we
Those
are
words that we live by.
We are making some steady progress over here at Low Brass U. If you're a student in the state of Texas, working on your all-state etudes, all of those etudes are up. They're all live, lit, and local. And there's also, I'm also starting to work on the Illinois etudes for this year.
Ooh.
So oddly enough, there was some overlap this year. So one of the tuba ones was the same as Illinois, and one of the tenor trombone one was the same as Illinois. And then I've recorded one euphonium one. I'll probably release and record tomorrow one of the bass trombone ones, and then probably do the other bass trombone one. And then the other euphonium one is a characteristic study. So we'll see when that one is ready for public consumption. I think some people watch some of my videos and are just like, oh yeah, you must be really good at sight reading. It's like, no, I do practice most of these.
Right.
And Arbin's characteristic studies on euphonium, while I have dabbled, those aren't necessarily ready for the main stage right now.
I feel like any characteristic study is going to be maybe like harder to get into a finished product than maybe you thought getting into it at the very beginning, or even looking at it on a sheet of paper.
Right. Especially, whenever you just are doing trumpet things, you get into this spot of like, well, where do I breathe? Do I do a big grandiose slowdown so that I can make a breath, because there is no breath, because it's all 16th notes? But yeah, this one isn't the worst of them. It's mostly an E flat minor, and then it adds a flat, and then it goes kind of to B flat major, but mostly just like a 5 of E flat minor. But yeah, it moves around, and it's not so bad, but it's definitely going to take me a few days to get it down. Just like the E flat minor one for TMEA this year. Are you familiar with that Voxman etude, Connor?
I sure am not.
So that's the one. It's often, or every, I think what are they on, a 4-year cycle or a 5-year cycle? I can't remember. But for ATSSB, the smaller schools in Texas, they use this etude, and it's just a lot of double tonguing and a lot of E flat minor things, and it's not impossible, but it does take some time. So yeah, it definitely is a little bit of work and a little bit of time that went into that one. That was the one that took me the longest. The other ones, a lot of them I'd practiced a good bit before, and even that one I had practiced, but it still took me a little bit more time. But I'm also looking at doing some of the Florida All-State etudes soon, hopefully. I don't want this channel to be exclusively All-State stuff, but I'm also willing to accept suggestions of other things to do. I'm probably going to start doing some excerpts as well. I think that's probably on the horizon for the channel. I think it's time. Putting excerpts out there is a little bit scary, but
like excerpts.
Yes, like orchestral excerpts for auditions.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's hard too for me is just I'm trying to keep it balanced between all of the low brass instruments, and especially with orchestral excerpts, then it's like, well, do I do band excerpts for euphonium? Do I do the few pieces that have euphonium in orchestra? And then also I definitely know and can play the tuba excerpts the best, currently speaking. I'm a little bit deeper into that list. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I think that there'll be some new, different types of content coming somewhat soon. on this channel. The live streams aren't going anywhere. Although we do need to figure out what we're gonna. I haven't really figured out what we're gonna do the first couple weeks in August yet, but we'll figure that out when time
we'll
comes.
When we get there. Yeah.
But yeah, so more All-State stuff, and the videos seem to be doing pretty well. From a algorithmic perspective. So that's always nice to see.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we talked about your counterweight thing. Do you want to talk a little bit? Also, James said, I'll put James' comment on the screen here. If I can find my mouse, which I seem to not be able to. Let's see, or I can just read it. That would be too easy. Refresh. James says, I need all the excerpts on your sousaphone. Beedlo was ridiculous. So what James is referencing, if you're not hip to YouTube Shorts, I believe they're called. I think YouTube is still not quite sure what they are, but they're trying to take a little bit of the market share away from TikTok and Instagram Reels and those sorts of things. So they have kind of short form content that is designed to be portrait and a little bit different than regular YouTube content. But I posted one of my TikToks over there, and it was me playing Beedlo on sousaphone.
Oh no, Zach.
Yes, I did it. So, it wasn't because that's what you should play it on or anything like that. But it was mostly just I sometimes get a little bit annoyed is the wrong word, but I get a little. There are some persnickety comments sometimes about how you can only play this because you have an F tuba. You can only play this because you have a C tuba instead of a B flat tuba. These sorts of things. Oh, you can only play this because of a small bore, but can't do this on a large bore. You couldn't play that high F on a large bore. You can only play it on a small bore, or you can only play it because you're playing alto. Those sorts of things. And again, just because of those sorts of comments, occasionally I like to keep it real and show that those things can be done on other instruments. Am I advocating that you go into your next orchestral audition and play Beedlo on sousaphone? No.
Yes.
Yeah, you heard it here. You heard it here first. Definitely bring a sousaphone to every orchestral audition from this point on.
I mean, you might as well be ready.
Logan's gonna do it. Logan's ready.
You get to the final round, third round. They're like, "All right, we're gonna have you play with the section," and you roll up on stage. Just 3 other sousaphones. The trombone section is on sousaphones.
Just like all playing Ride of the Valkyries, just the tuba part, like 4 of them in unison.
No, they're playing that like sousaphone piece that like went viral on YouTube in like 2004. You know what I'm talking about? Like the high school kids, the boom, 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 boom.
Oh, I do know. Yeah, someone in the comments definitely knows what that is. I can't remember what that is.
There's probably a name for that, and there's probably a source to cite with a school that can be accredited for that masterpiece.
Right.
But, you haven't been to a real final round if you haven't played that.
Right.
On sousaphones with an all sousaphone section.
Right. That's really how the pros do it. But yeah. So James also says. That I only have B flat tuba, so despite it being a joke, it's actually inspirational to see that it can be done. Sonic Boom is what it was.
Sonic Boom.
But yeah, and that's
right.
And James, that's exactly why I posted it, even though it's kind of it was kind of a silly video. That's the point that I was trying to make. Cause I think was it 2019? I think it was when I did one of the Texas All-State Etudes. And I really didn't even think anything of it, but I played it on F tuba. It was like a Coprage etude, and I played it on F tuba, and apparently that just made everyone upset. There's a lot of negative comments of just like it's like you can only play this because it's on F tuba. It's like you couldn't play this on B flat or C tuba, and like even some professionals that I knew were like, yeah, it's weird that people are doing that on F tuba. I assume that they're trying to trick kids and show them what a bad sound is, and it's just like, all right, like that's that's your take and that's how you feel. Realistically, and I don't think I've publicly said why I played it on F tuba. the main reason why I played it on F-tuba is because I record in a small room, and F-tuba sounds better compared to my 6-quarter C tuba that's meant to be used with an 80-person orchestra.
Right.
That's why I did it, but clearly that was not a good reason.
That wasn't good enough. I'm sorry.
There's also the side of it that it's also from a horn book. And horn in F, I think that there's a little bit of logic for that.
There's an argument that can be made.
But the ultimate irony, I think, is because of so many of the negative comments, that's my most viewed video on YouTube. Because
well,
YouTube,
it's like they say,
all publicity is good publicity? Publicity?
Publicity, yes.
Yeah, publicity. There you go. That's a small market joke, but that's a good joke.
That's true. We'll move on from it.
But yes, so ultimately with YouTube and most kind of algorithmically based social media or search engine things, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's likes or dislikes, good comments or bad comments, all engagement is good. So that video kind of went, I wouldn't call it viral, but for me...
Tuba viral? Would you call it tuba viral?
I think that's probably fair. It definitely went viral in my world. I think it's up to like...
Maybe not sonic boom viral, would we say?
Probably, I'd have to check my facts and figures, but I would assume not as viral as Sonic Boom.
Don't sell yourself short.
But, it has, I think, 96,000 views.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Which is my second most viewed video on the internet. Oddly enough, my top most viewed video on the internet is on TikTok. So.
Oh, I know what this one is.
That's the how high can you play on the tuba. So, which I think I also posted as a YouTube short, as it were. But let's see here.
For those keeping score at home, I found the video. I don't know if this is the original posting of it, but it's from 2007. It was a video of that Sonic Boom song, and I remember this title. It was called "Tuba Players at Their Best." If you remember that, like
okay,
that rings a bell, and it has them in the band room doing the whole thing. 900,000 for those keeping score at home. Not that it matters.
Which, if my math is correct, that is more than 96,000.
Yes, I don't have a calculator on my person, but he might be right.
Right. Logan is asking, have you heard a recent story where a pianist made a not so nice comment about a performance? One person said, I don't see you playing it, so the internet troll learned the song and nailed it. I don't know about that, but that seemed, that makes sense that would happen.
Sure.
But yeah, at the end of the day, I think we should just all be nice to each other, but...
Say nice things on the internet. That's what I do.
Right. I do read every single comment, or at least I try to. Sometimes YouTube's reporting of comments is a little bit tricky, where it'll say there's a comment, but I can't find it. So it's did I miss it? Did it get taken down? What is it against community guidelines? Unclear to me. But I usually read every comment that I can find, and I respond to most of them, at least for now.
I can't imagine there's a whole lot that you can say constructively about a tuba that is against community guidelines.
Well, no,
I don't mean that as a challenge to anyone. But.
Yeah, well, I just mean sometimes there'll be comment, just hate speech or things like that.
Oh, I see. Yeah, just random little things.
But yeah, that doesn't. Most of my channel is pretty positive.
Right. It's tuba channel.
Right.
It's gonna be pretty good vibes.
So I guess it was Rush.
It's a low brass channel.
Rush E was that video. I'm not familiar with that video. Let me see if I can find it or pull it up. But I don't know. Let's see here. Rush E. Is that the pianist? Not actually familiar with this. Oh, this seems like I'm not going to find what I'm looking for, but I'll try to look into it. I won't find it quickly anyway. But yeah, so yeah, I think most of the time the comments are pretty constructive and pretty helpful in my comment section, in the Low Brass U comment section. But there's always going to be some bad eggs, and at the end of the day, I think that if you don't have negative comments, you don't have a lot of views.
Yeah.
That's
a
where
good
those
point.
start coming in.
Right. Law of averages.
But yeah, so, but cool. Maybe we should talk a little bit about your experience traveling with instruments. I guess both of our experience traveling with instruments, because I think that there are some really interesting stories with all of the low brass instruments, and maybe you can start out with your experience.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got lots of experiences traveling with horns, trombones, both positive and negative. Recently, I've hit a stride with having a smaller case, which has been a lot of fun. My whole problem with traveling with the trombone
You've
is
always had big
usually
cases.
getting onto a plane. I've always had a little bit on the chunky side. I like my cases a little bigger. I like to put snacks in my cases. I like to have a little stand light.
You've always
like
had
to have a folding music stand in there.
You've always had the cases that fit every horn, which is a good way of saying it's too big for your horn.
I'm usually putting the smallest version of like a trombone that you would put into a one-size-fits-all case.
Right.
There are advantages and disadvantages to that. The advantage is when you are flying somewhere with that trombone in that case, you can put like 7 to 10 shirts in the main cabin of the trombone case.
That's
which
one way to
not
do
only
it.
Covers your checked bag.
Right.
That also further protects your trombone from any impact damage and things like that. And I like to keep a bag of peanuts in there as well, because sometimes you're just like standing around waiting to play and get hungry.
Yeah.
Which then also, if you have the peanut bag, you also have to have the squeegee and the snake to get the peanuts out of your trombone when you're done playing, which I don't always do, but eventually you will have to. They're going to have to come out one way or another, whether you wait an hour or you wait a year. There you have it. And so anyways, my whole goal, trombone, it's always fit into trunks of cars. It's been easy to travel on buses and sedans, SUVs. That's not the problem. The problem is planes with overhead compartments. Now, recently, I have relocated to where I'm always flying out of Seattle. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I fly out of Seattle, Tacoma Airport. It seems like all the planes that fly out of there are going to a hub. Like I'm either going straight to a destination in like California, or I'm going to like DFW, or I have to fly through O'Hare. And so it's these big planes, and my trombone cases have been historically been able to fit up there. So I've had some success recently. That's not always the case. Like when I was flying out of Louisville, Kentucky, or going to Washington,
You get a lot of
DC,
small planes that way.
It wasn't always the big Airbuses, exactly. And I had the big, like, trombone travel case that was not great. And the case that I'm using right now is the one I got from my Olds, which is like a super old trombone.
Like as small as possible case.
It was gotten from like an estate sale or a yard sale or something. It was a deal. And so it's got this teeny tiny case. I can't even, when I'm like carrying it around and going to like clubs and whatnot, like just driving, I don't even close the clip near the bell section, because it's like a little bit of a squeeze. Like it's not hurting anything, but it's like if I don't have to squeeze it super hard, I'm not going to, so I don't worry about it.
That's like
when I'm flying, of course, I squeeze it down.
Right. That's kind of like the box 16 case that I have. That's like from it's like came with the horn in the 80s or 70s, and just like it's like kind of got like a faux alligator skin sort of thing to it, and it's very skinny, and there's no padding, there's nothing helpful in there. I almost never use it.
There's something about, like, I feel like at some point in like your career, if you were a trombone player, like you will have the alligator case, and I don't know, there must have been some meeting in like 1965 or 1970 where they were just like, hey everyone, what if we made our trombone cases look like skinny little weird dress shoes?
Right.
And I don't know why that was an interesting aesthetic decision. I'm not mad about it. I like it. I think it looks really cool. Alligator skin wasn't my first choice when we were going with like the trombone texture pack.
Right.
It's cool. But it's, so that one, if you can get your hands, like even go to a yard sale or somewhere, like, they might just keep an eye out for these cases, because there seem to be everywhere, and not all of them have a trombone in it that you have to pay for. And it's a great way, it's a gamble using that as a flight case, because yes, it's very small, and the probability of getting your weird alligator case into or in the overhead compartment, extremely high, even on a pretty small plane. And I myself am not one of those people that buys the fancy ticket that makes you get on the plane first. I'm not one of those people, and I'm also not one of those people that likes to like confrontation to like go up to the counter and be like, "Hey, can I go on early even though like it's not my turn because I have a trombone?" Like I've had that conversation before. Usually when I had the bigger
It's called fashion,
trombone
Connor.
case. Exactly, look it up. Sweaty. But so yeah, I don't like to bug the flight attendants or anything like that. So I can get it on there pretty high. The problem that you run into is that the alligator case is great until it isn't. I haven't gotten to that point yet, to where like you've tried everything and you can't get it in the overhead compartment. Well, I've been there before.
But not
So let's
with
talk
that
about that.
case.
Not with that case. Alligator has worked every time. I will be the first to say that like this experiment is not complete. This is not a comprehensive study, and I'll let you guys know when the alligator experiment fails. So let's talk about what happens when the overhead compartment thing doesn't work and you're trying to shove it. There's no space. The flight attendants have closed all of the over things, and you're holding your trombone. The only option looks like it's going under the plane. So you have two options, and both of them you're going to have to look as pitiful and confused as possible. So for each of these two scenarios to work, you have to pretend like you've never been on a plane before and that you're lost and you're confused, like, my teacher bought me this plane ticket, I don't know where to go, and like, what do I do with my trombone, please? So the flight attendants will either make room for it somewhere, or they might put it in like where the pilots put their stuff, or there's also like a coat closet on some planes.
Not
a lot
all.
of Southwest planes and Alaska Airlines, I don't think they have it, but American Airlines and like sometimes like United or Delta might have one of those, like maybe like on a big 737 or something like that. Look for the coat closet or like a suit closet, and if it's not a particularly rainy day, there's not going to be a bunch of umbrellas in there, so that's your final plan. Otherwise, they're probably going to have to gate check it. I've never had an issue with gate checking before. I know people that have. My problem was the only time that I've had a trombone go kerplunk was when I think they told us to actually check it like checked baggage. I was flying to Beijing from Nashville.
World traveler over here.
I know, look at me go. Exactly. So we had to transfer to another flight company when we were in LAX, and it was at that point we had to check our trombones, and mine kerplunked, and it wasn't like that bad, but it was like from the plane, like the belly of the plane, when they were trying to load it up on the thingy, it fell. And so from like the belly of the plane to the ground, that's enough of a distance that if you have a big sturdy wooden case, it's just going to explode. It's not going to work. So
right.
Word to the wise, if you are going to check your bag or check your trombone case, maybe like, I don't know, wrap it in some foam or some bubble wrap just in case they kerplunk it. You might be able to be okay. But that's my saga of trombone travel.
Yeah,
So,
I've never had any like really horror stories. I have had to gate check, and I definitely I fight that like the plague now, but I think that happened when I was like maybe 17, and I was just like, oh, okay, take my expensive trombone, it's fine.
Right.
But yeah, you can do a lot with just a smile. That's definitely something I've found. Try to be friendly. Don't it's not your best move to be the like really obnoxious, unkind person, and then also expect your trombone to go where you want it to go.
Right.
That's definitely
I've pretty much never seen that work ever.
Right. But yeah, bringing a smaller case decreases your chances of having to gate check it. But if it's not a good case, you might be more likely to have a problem. I usually do fly with a one-size-fits-all tenor case. Like I fly with my Edwards case, even when I'm flying a small bore. And that fits on pretty much every plane. Even the small, like 1+2 seaters, it'll still fit on those planes. It's like you cringe a little bit when you push it in there, but it's, especially with having an instrument with a smaller bell, it's okay. But one word of the wise to, if you're going to have to gate check it, the first thing that I would do is I would take all my clothes out of my other bag and put them in my trombone case, because one of the problems is not necessarily how sturdy the case is, but the fitment between the trombone and the case itself. You can do a lot of damage of just the trombone moving around inside of the case erratically, and you want to make you want to minimize that. So I try to put as much clothing or whatever you have in there, so that it's not just doing that, not just rolling around inside of there. But yeah, I haven't had any damage, knock on wood. But I've had some not so fun times with tuba flying. So tuba flying is definitely, that's like, let's up the ante right now. It's a situation for sure. And the problem with tuba is obviously how large it is. It's definitely not fitting in an overhead bin. Let's get that out of the way.
No.
That's not an option. You kind of have two options, and they have different sort of success rates depending on your situation. You have check it, and then you also have buy a second ticket for it. And I've legally, as far as I understand it, definitely not a lawyer or anything, but legally you're allowed to take any musical instrument on the plane, and if it's bigger than a cello, you have to buy another ticket, is my understanding of the law.
I see.
That being said, I remember I was flying to DC for an audition once, and like by way of flying to the Baltimore airport, like the BWI, I think, that one. And I had both of my tubas with me, and the tickets were so cheap that I bought 3 tickets total, which my understanding was that was okay. And then the problem was my C tuba was too big to be scanned. And so they were like, yeah, you have to check this. And it's like, I have a gig bag. It's like, no, I'm not checking this.
Right.
Like, I'll rent a car and drive to Texas, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely was not an ideal situation by any stretch.
So what happened?
So I basically was just like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like, if I can't get on the plane, I can't get on the plane, but I'm not, like, that's not an option. And it went all the way up to the highest ranking TSA employee at the airport. Like a man in a suit that, was in an office somewhere that got drug out to talk to me. And and the conversation started with, yeah, you're not bringing that on the plane. You have to check it. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. It's just going to be destroyed in a gig bag. Like, it's just going to be destroyed. It's just going to be steamrolled. I was not.
Like, there's no hope.
Right. I was not going to do that. I was going to I was going to drive home, and it was going to be not so fun. But what are you going to do? So basically, I just I didn't argue, because it's like, there's no. I just said, yeah, I really can't do that. It'll just get destroyed, and I can't do that. If I have to rent a car and drive, I just explained the situation. Then eventually, they did let me do it, and they just looked inside of it and deemed that there wasn't a weapon or something inside of there. And then I got on the plane.
Depends on your definition of a weapon.
There you go. But I got on the plane, and
Wow.
got seatbelt extenders for both my tubas and sat in the first row, and me and 2 tubas.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it was not a fun experience. I don't think I'll do 2 again, especially because the irony is I do have a flight case. I only didn't bring it because it was going to be cheaper to buy 3 tickets than 2 tickets and a flight case, because I was flying Southwest and the tickets were like $37.
Oh my gosh.
And so, but flying with an oversized and or overweight item with Southwest is $75. So it's not like I was saving a ton of money, but I saved $38 by not bringing a flight case. And you might think that the flight case is safer because I do have a Walt Johnson flight case, which I don't think those are being made anymore, but it's like a $1,200 flight case. Like it's a nice flight case.
Yeah.
But the problem I've had with flying with that in the past is the flight case is only as good as it is, how well someone closed it. And once it goes behind closed doors, you don't know what's happening to that. And I remember I flew with one time. This is actually before I had one. I flew with our good friend Mystery Jeffrey, who has not been on a stream in a while. But Mystery Jeffrey,
Gone but not forgotten,
right? But they, there's a very clear way that the teeth, like the grooves of the case, are supposed to go, and it was the opposite. And it's like nothing bad happened, but it's just like the amount of force that they would have had to apply to get that closed. Like,
right.
It was
like we all played with Legos growing up. Like I feel like everyone like we should have a common understanding of like how to close a lid.
Right.
I shouldn't say we all played with Legos, but
yeah.
If you're working in the airline industry, maybe you haven't had explicit training on how to open and shut a lid, but like as a supervisor, I would look for that skill. And if I didn't see that skill, I would take it upon myself to train my team in lid opening and lid fastening.
I think that's
maybe
great.
Start with Tupperware. Like, hey, I can't get this sandwich Tupperware shut. Can you help me out? Just like, see what areas might need to work on. And then build from there up to the tuba flight case.
So yes, I've never had any like real horror stories, but boy, do I get very nervous.
It's horrible.
Especially with taking tuba auditions for orchestras, especially when you need two. Mm-hmm. I just, I've done some really long drives, and you also have to have that moment of like, do I really want to take this audition? Do I want to drive, from Texas to Maine or wherever?
Right.
Because the other thing too that you have to think about is like with tuba especially, it's like, so you're going to get there, you're not going to have a car, then what? Are you gonna?
Oh my gosh!
Are you gonna Uber? No, you're gonna Uber X everywhere, and hopefully that works out.
Right. Maybe if you have two tubas, like maybe their trunk is empty enough for you to throw your stuff in there, and like.
I mean, with two tubas, there are sedans that you can put both. Like I drive a sedan, I drive an Impala that fits both tubas in the trunk. Just on like an assumption, I would say, if it's a sedan, it's not gonna fit both tubas. At least not my tubas, like not a 6/4 C tuba and an F tuba. So yeah, it's like I've done that game. Fortunately, like when I did fly to Baltimore, our good friend Matt Corrigan, I stayed with him, and it ended up working out that I like was able to borrow his car and everything. It was, I can't remember exactly that. It was kind of a weird situation because he wasn't there at first because he was like on tour, but I can't remember all the details. But it ended up not actually being that big of a deal for me. But the risk is very high. And especially when you're taking auditions, it's like, do you want more things to think about or fewer things to think about?
Right. Like, I mean, you're always going to end up with like this logistical headache the day of. I feel like it's just like Murphy's Law of auditions. It always ends up being that way. I'm always like just like unreasonably sweaty at every audition. And it's not because I'm nervous. Like I am like nervous, but it's like I'm never like nervous enough to be like the sweaty guy. But then something will happen where I like, have to like run up like multiple flights of stairs. We've both been there.
Right.
And then congratulations, sweaty. Like you're at the audition, and that just always happens.
Right. So James says the two tuba problem is once again solved by just playing everything on sousaphone.
Right.
James, like, I don't have a counter argument.
Where's the downside?
Right.
Here's the downside: is the price of sousaphones is unreasonable.
Yeah, they're a little bit
too high.
They're not as high as tubas, but yes, you are.
I'm out of the tuba market. I'm small potatoes. I'll never make it to the tuba circuit. I'm trying to get my entry level into the tuba world, and the overhead to get in on the ground floor with the sousaphone, I'm just not there. I can't do it.
But to combine both your comment of being sweaty at an audition and James' comment of two tubas, I once did an audition with 3 tubas. And then I had to do a lot of stairs.
This is gonna come up.
Yeah, so this was the Milwaukee Symphony audition, and there what did they have? They had Mahler 5, and I had access at the time to a really nice B flat tuba, a Miraphone. What is it? I can't remember. 191, I believe, is the model number. It was like a really nice rose brass 5-valve B flat tuba. And, I was playing excerpts for someone in preparation for this audition, and they were like, have you worked on that B flat? And I was like, yeah, I've worked on it a little bit. It's like, let's hear it. And then I played it, and so it's like, you should play that tuba on that excerpt. And so I was like, yeah, you're right. It does, because it's like a B flat minor sort of thing. It works a little bit better instead of all of the 2 and 4 D flats on C tuba. You get these. That's a lot easier. So it made sense. But then it was called on the first round, which was a little bit unexpected. And I can't remember what else was on there, but I definitely needed my C and I definitely needed my F. And so I brought 3 tubas to the first round, and I thought it was smart for me to give the adjudicator person my F, since that's the smallest one, and I would take the C and the B flat. So usually I take both tubas, and I don't let the adjudicator person take one. But it's small tuba in one hand, big tuba in the other. Double big tuba. And then it was also in a very old building, and I think the elevator was out, or there wasn't. I don't remember the exact situation, but I remember walking way further than I had in any audition, and it just was I just remember being out of breath and it just being terrible, just the experience of it. So yeah, I should have just played everything on sousaphone. That's definitely the solution, for sure.
Would have solved everything. Would have been more portable too.
Right. But alas, hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
But
what can you do?
Now my goal is to not have to carry around instruments any more than I have to, and choose the smallest one possible. Although I do have a sousaphone gig this weekend.
Really?
Playing some Dixieland music on Saturday night.
Oh, did we talk about this already?
Probably off stream. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But yeah, so that's maybe we did last week. I can't remember. But it's just an interesting thing of it's not something I do every single day, but it should be fun. Cool. I'm looking forward to it. I've got to make sure I've got all my sousaphone bass line chops all together, and we'll see how it goes. But I think it's gonna be a pretty laid back gig. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I could have played it on tuba, but I think it was going to be easier on sousaphone for my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's not like a marching or there's no movement or standing up that's required. Equipment manager asks, "Are you excited for the Olympics?" Yeah, I'm hopefully going to watch some of the USA basketball stuff. We'll see how that goes. I know they've had a little bit of a slow start in exhibition play, but I'm hopeful that they'll turn it around, especially now that they'll have three new players who are all playing in the finals, and a few other players that are replacements for health and safety protocols things. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the Olympics as a whole, but probably most specifically the NBA. Or not the NBA, the basketball. It's not the NBA.
Speaking of Milwaukee.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're hip.
See, I knew a sports fact. Yeah.
Yeah, you did know a sports fact. Yeah, I thought we were gonna have to call. I thought we were gonna have to call off the stream today because it should have been Game 7. And I wasn't even gonna make a joke that we got to get off here so we don't miss Game 7, and hopefully the Suns are gonna win Game 7. But I felt it was maybe insensitive, but I still said it anyway. So. But, hello, Brady. Hope you're doing all right.
Peace and love, Brady.
But yeah, are you an Olympics fan? There's anything on the Olympics side of things that you're?
I haven't kept a really great commit this year. I thought I was watching the Olympics. I was watching a really rousing game of hockey in my hotel a couple of days ago. Turns out these are the
summer games.
So I watched, I think it was Michigan State and someone else playing hockey for about an hour and a half. And I was like, wow, the Olympics, this is the top. This is it. They were still very good. I mean, I thought it was world-class hockey for all I know. So good for them.
James says, I've been playing a Dixieland band recently. Makes me tempted to buy a bell front tuba for it. A Con 24J for $1,500 has me really desiring to throw my money away. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't do it enough to justify the instrument, but that would be a pretty slick tuba for this sort of gig. You know, bell front, or the recording bells, as they used to call them. They're definitely some slick tubas from yesteryear.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear, you know, maybe compositions that maybe weren't intentionally like with the bell front tuba in mind, but maybe like thinking of the bell front, the 24J as like a period instrument in that sort of context.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like that's a little hard to agree with, but it's, you know, it's definitely a little bit like that. I wouldn't say that it sounds so different that it's like, you know,
it wouldn't be like, wow, the bell is facing forward.
It looks different, I guess. Certainly.
I guess so. It would look really cool.
I would kind of say it's like the same difference between like kind of modern small bores and like really early small bores with like really tiny bells. Just in like not that they're, you know, the recording bells usually are pretty big actually, but, you know, just in the way that it's like, yeah, it's pretty much the same. But
right, the bones are still the same.
Right.
I get you. I had an interesting conversation recently with a saxophone player who's also a great bassoonist and comes from a background of like Baroque ensembles with various reed instruments.
Okay. And
was asking about putting together like an ensemble to play music from like, it was like a really specific years. It was like somewhere in the 20s to somewhere in the 40s, and like treat it like a period ensemble. And he was like, you got a valve trombone? I was like, sure do. Like, I can do a Juan Tizol impression, but like if we do any Italian opera, I'm going to have practice. And he said no opera, so that was great.
Well, also to be fair, that those are rotor valve trombones for the opera stuff.
All right, I don't want any trouble. Yeah, okay. Yes, you are correct.
So you wouldn't have the correct instrument. But yeah, I mean,
I wouldn't.
I guess in that sort of context, I guess to me, I just think period, and I think like it has to at least be before the 20th century started.
So you can't have a period ensemble.
I don't think that there's anything.
In the 20th century.
I don't think that is actually true. I just think that that's how I think about it in my own head.
Aesthetically,
I think it's just like at some point it's just like, so what is this? You know, early 2010s period ensemble? Is that, you know? I mean, I know that's not what the argument you're trying to make.
Yes, we were playing strictly My Morning Jacket and Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. I'm sorry, get used to it.
But yeah, I mean that's. Yeah, I think just especially with tuba, it's like, yes, there has been change over the years, but it's like in the United States, there are basically no tubas, or there are very few tubas. I shouldn't say there are no tubas, but there aren't really tubas from the 19th century. Although the tuba was patented and it did exist at that point in time, it wasn't really a tuba in the United States yet. And then you kind of get them turn of the century, a little bit more so here. I mean, there were some, but they you know, the tuba is just such a young instrument where compared to like trombone, where you have like, you know, you have the sack butt, and then you even have like kind of the halfway in between of like romantic trombones. If you've ever seen romantic trombones, they're basically what you'd expect. They're kind of halfway in between a sack butt and a modern trombone. Like it's
slightly flairier.
Yeah, like it starts out like a sack butt, but the bell flare, albeit small, looks like a more modern instrument. But you can even see that, you know, in like older, you know, like 1920s, 1930s, 1940s trombones. It's like the flares don't look the same as they do now. But yeah, that's definitely interesting. I think at some point I would like to get into period instruments, but it's like there are too many real instruments, or, you know, modern instruments, I should say, that I'm interested in to do that yet.
Right. It's still interesting.
But James says people want to do 50s, 60s rock want exact right guitars, tube amps, drum heads, and like not necessary, but still something you can do will count for enthusiasts. Yeah. I mean that's definitely the same sort of thing. And you could it's like I've got a trombone from 1972, I've got a tuba from 1972. Is that automatically like that was this quintessential 70s trombone sound? It's like maybe.
Well, I think like when you get that specific into like 50s and 60s rock or things like that, or maybe even later, when I hear those discussions,
with electronics, it's different.
And it gets more specific. It's like, oh, this sounds like, my toms are giant, and it sounds like early Led Zeppelin. It's great, and so I think it's like you can get specific like that. Where
Right.
like if you have a trombone from a specific time that I think there could be something interesting about exploring specific setups of specific players in a certain way like that to kind of explore sounds. The problem that you get into in the tuba world, I imagine, is that as important as it would be to like find the specific tuba for the sound that you want to emulate, if you're trying to reference a specific player or a specific recording, you would also have to replicate in some way the resonating chamber that the tuba is occupying in the recording that you find significant, like what hall it was in, and the recording equipment at the time.
Yeah, and I think it's also gets really tricky with that sort of stuff because there's a trend of this instrument is better, not necessarily different. So there's like that's a conversation that I've had several times, like in regard to Symphony Fantastique, the Berlioz piece, and it's that. Berlioz, when he wrote that, there wasn't, the tuba didn't look like what it was today, and he didn't write it with the tuba in mind officially, but there's evidence to suggest that he did like the sound of the tuba, and, that he would have, if he were alive today, he would have preferred that instrument for his music. And it's just like, I think that's hard to say, because, especially like I think about the Symphony Fantastique and the Dies Irae moment where it's, low reeds in tubas, but those tubas should have been ophicleides or serpents, like something that gets a much more reedier sound. Maybe one might say more awful Clyde sound.
I was gonna.
Yeah, I know you're gonna say it.
More like that. Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing. It's like, and it's marked like fortissimo. It's marked very loud, and on those sorts of instruments, honking away on them sounds very different, and it's not as loud, and it's much more of a reedy sound than tubas just leveling everything. Because the tuba could just. Especially you've got two tuba players. It's like, if the two tuba players make it their job to play louder than the bassoons, they will. That's not a competition.
It's actually a forba.
Right. There you go.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sure that's probably a very old tuba joke. I shouldn't have said that.
I don't know that it really is, but I understood it immediately. 2 tubas equals a forba. But yeah, essentially, that's definitely one of those things where some people would say it should be a tuba-dominated sound there. I lean towards thinking it should be a more reedy, bassoon-dominated sound there, and I kind of think that the tubas should play more like mezzo piano, mezzo forte. But not everybody agrees with that.
It's more about the blending of the timbre.
That's kind of how I see it. But, again, like we're all, at some level, we're guessing. Because the person who made this decision, right, and he made it without the information that we have today, or the instruments that we have today. I forgot what we were talking about exactly, but
we were talking about 50s and 60s rock.
Oh yeah, it's just like thinking of the period sort of stuff. It's like, yeah, at some level, it's like, is this better or is this worse? And there's also a big, especially with tuba, there's a huge globalization element to it and trombones too, of what people were playing where. Like, we were talking about Italian opera stuff. It's like they were playing all rotor stuff, and for Germany, it's like C tuba is like a thing now mostly, but not everybody played. Like that's like top players in some orchestras play C tuba, but not all of them. So yeah, I mean it's. I don't know. I think that it's an interesting topic, but it's kind of one of those like barbershop topics of like, is this athlete better than this athlete, and they played in different eras. Like, we'll never know. We can't possibly see that moment happen. But we have some questions that I want to get to.
Yeah, lots of good questions.
Equipment manager says, what's your opinion on me possibly showing my director your channel as a low brass recording source? I definitely have no problems with it. That's definitely my goal with the channel, is to be that recording source. Believe it or not, I'm not eligible to, try to make the all-state band in the state of Texas, or any other state for that matter. So I don't play these etudes, so that I can get better at them, so I can get first chair. I try to get better at them. I try to play them well so that everyone has a good recording source, at least a pretty decent recording source. There are always things that could be better, and things that you can. I would hope that the top player sounds better than my videos. That's what I would hope.
You'll get there one day.
But yeah, maybe one day I'll make the top all-state band in Texas. For anybody keeping score at home, I didn't live in the state of Texas in high school, so there was never a chance. But let's see. So Brian says, how do you guys think Beethoven was able to compose even though he was deaf? Yeah, so like later in his career, he wasn't struggled to hear, but I think that I wouldn't consider myself to be a musical genius. I only use myself as a reference point to say I don't think I'm a musical genius. I think especially even now, I think I can compose some music without hearing it. I'm not saying that I would be Beethoven, but I don't think it's that crazy when you've spent your whole life doing something like that.
Right.
Like I don't know if you have something.
The only frame of reference that I have, and again, I think it's great to point out that neither Zach or I are self-proclaimed composing geniuses, but I do have a computer sitting behind me where sometimes the sound doesn't work on Finale at all on the keyboard or playback at all, so it's just a completely silent world. Also, when I hit the expression tool, it crashes, so that's sick. But there are times when I turn it on and the sound's not coming out, and it's like, well, I need to flesh out these big band voicings whether I want to or not, so I'm going to work on this computer. And I know enough, I don't know everything about music theory, I don't know everything about composing. I know enough to get my chart done, and if the sound's not there, you just punch it in and it goes. Of course, I listen back to it later.
Right.
But
I guess the point we're trying to make is that if Beethoven was a musical genius, which I think we all accept that to be true, it doesn't seem that crazy to me that he was able to do that. I know on surface level it sounds crazy. Mm-hmm. I just don't see it as that crazy. I mean, it's impressive, don't get me wrong, and I think it's further proof that he probably was a musical genius. Mm-hmm. But, it just doesn't seem that ridiculous, I guess.
Right. Stranger things have happened.
Right. Let's see. James says, the difference between what the composer had access to, imagined for their pieces, versus what you'd think they'd enjoy your current instruments is really finicky. Below on French C tuba, tenor tuba parts on Mars. That's a perfect example. And that kind of goes to the point earlier that I was making about the globalization aspect of tuba stuff. Because the French C tuba is a really interesting instrument. It's a really interesting sort of thing to to think about, because it kind of looks like a fat euphonium, but it plays tuba parts. I mean, you think about we think about French C tuba as being really high stuff, but it's there's a little bit more that goes into it. There was, the rest of the piece in general, the rest of pictures at an exhibition. Yeah, B low is really high, but the rest of the piece isn't necessarily, and it's all meant to be played on that instrument. Or at least that was the instrument that it was being imagined for. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting kind of idea of, especially when certain pieces were written like that, when the world was not as open, the borders weren't as open from country to country, and we didn't have the internet or things like that. It's you showed up to the orchestra, you saw that they had these instruments. It's hey, do these instruments make these noises? Cool, let's do it. Compared to now, where it's it's just a little bit different. So yeah, that's definitely one thing I would kind of think about. And yeah, I guess it's definitely an interesting sort of idea, but it's one of those things where it's almost impossible to know. You can kind of guess at it. You can kind of make what you think are educated guesses, but ultimately, like going back to the Symphony Fantastique thing, it's whatever the composer wants, or whatever the conductor wants. Sorry, the conductor wants a lot of tubas during that Dies Irae moment. You get to play. If they don't, you don't. So your opinion, I wouldn't say is invalid, but it's not the most, it's ultimately a small part of it. Do you have any other thoughts about that, Connor?
Nah, I think that's good. I think you covered it.
And then Mr. Anonymous says, what's your favorite orchestra? Do you want to go first, Connor?
Ooh, what's up, Mr. Anonymous? Am I allowed to say the Metropole Orchestra? I have a good reason.
Let's hear your reason, then we can decide.
My reason is because they have a recorded album featuring Andy Martin. So that's my reason.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's hard. I think that there are too many good orchestras to just say one. And I think it also, like, a little bit of what I like to think about is I listen to, when I'm learning excerpts, especially learning pieces, especially if it's something that I don't know, which, like, on an audition list, that's relatively rare at this point, but occasionally there are pieces that I maybe know but don't know well. The first thing I do is, where is this composer from, and then what orchestras from that country could I listen to play their music?
Nice, yeah.
And I think that because especially in an audition setting, it's like style is so important, and it's just like, to me, it's like, who plays German music the best? Probably the Germans. Probably plays Italian music the best, or maybe not the best, but the most appropriate style.
Who would have had, like, for like early recordings, like, who would have had the most information and wealth to,
right,
or context to draw upon for a recording, especially if you're going back and listening to earlier, like, definitive recordings of the music.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing. You could say that same sort of thing about like jazz music. It's like, not saying that people outside of the United States don't play it well or anything, but it's like I imagine that they mostly study American jazz musicians, and it's kind of like go to the source is kind of my thinking.
Right. That's a more of a gray area, only because proportionately jazz music has existed in the age of information.
Sure.
Where, like, the internet existed, like, longer, just in proportion to classical music.
Right.
And there's that. But yeah, I absolutely completely agree. And with jazz music, the same thing applies of, like, oh, I'm learning Is That So by Duke Pearson. I'm going to check out, like, you should check out the Michael Deese recording from the Michael Deese Big Band, but who else you should check out? It's like, you might want to hear what Duke Pearson does over the Duke Pearson tune.
Right.
So that would be like the other version of that.
Yeah, so I guess I don't really have a favorite orchestra, because I think that it's important to listen to all of them, or at least different country, orchestras from different countries and things like that. But I mean, most of my answers are going to be the same that you hear from a lot of people. I mean, it's like I listen to a lot of the Chicago Symphony, New York Phil, the Cleveland Orchestra, Boston, Philadelphia. It's like a lot of the LA Phil. It's like a lot of the places that you would imagine. Then also, obviously London Symphony. Especially like there's a recording of the Planets by London Symphony. It's like, that's my favorite version of the Planets, and it's like, well, where's Gustav Holst from? It's like that sort of stuff kind of just makes sense. To me, to go that way. And the Berlin Philharmonic, it's like the Vienna Philharmonic. There are plenty of great orchestras. It's like we're not struggling to find good orchestras. I feel like. Brian says, which of your instruments would you choose to play for the rest of your life, and would you choose to play only classical on the instrument or only jazz, assuming revenue isn't a factor? That's hard, because that's kind of like my whole thing is I like doing multiple things, and I like not getting bored.
Right.
I don't know that
I think I would have a more straight ahead
yeah.
answer
If you want
to
to
that.
answer.
Sure. I mean, obviously I would probably play jazz trombone. That's kind of a little bit of a specialization already. But I would say if I had to like get more specific than that, if I could only play one like really specific type of jazz trombone for the rest of my life, I would say big band, because you'd have more people to hang out with for the rest of your life, and you could do like small group sort of stuff within your arrangements, which happens a lot in big band music anyways. So you kind of get a little bit of both. So that would be what I would do.
I think my answer would also be jazz trombone, but only for the reason that that's the easiest thing that I do to do forever.
What do you mean by that?
Playing tuba is not generally going to work out for your entire life as easily as playing trombone. And then also playing trombone in a jazz setting or anything in a jazz setting, you choose what notes you want to play. So as your playing may decline at some point in old age, you don't have to play as fast, you don't have to play as high, you don't have to play as low. There are all these sorts of ways that you can kind of keep things going.
Right.
So that's
an interesting point.
That's probably one of my biggest reasons. I thought about that a lot. Not saying, I think I'm young enough where I'm not knocking on that door anytime soon. But, tuba, your lung capacity, everyone's lung capacity goes down over the course of their lifetime. And the tuba, especially for me being 6'6", I have really big lungs. Part of what makes me, maybe not the world's worst tuba player is because I have large lungs. It makes a lot of things easier. As that gets harder, it will get a lot less fun.
Mm-hmm.
At least I think for me.
That makes sense. There's going to come a point in your life as far as like your physicality where like you can still play live at Capizoli's, but you cannot play Meyerson does, Romeo and Juliet or something like that.
Yeah.
Like there will be a day where that is out of your Venn diagram of like things you can do.
Right. So that's kind of my always thinking is that like at one point in my life I may only play trombone and it'll be okay.
It'll be cool. Welcome to your gig.
Yeah. But let's see. James has another weird tidbit of unlikely instrument choices. At Maynard Ferguson's recording of Chameleon, the bass line is played on straight tenor trombones with false tones. Weird moment if you get that part. I don't know that I knew that.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. Is that in B flat?
Yeah, so it's like G.
So you go down to a low C? Wow. That would be hard. Like, false tones are like hard. And then to play, I feel like playing
a moving
false
line.
Tones in half steps would be like the absolute hardest version of playing for me. I don't know. That's a good question maybe to talk about. Like, false tones are like a thing that like I got interested in and like incorporated into my routine when I was like doing really, really good with like I play the small bore and I play the large bore, and anything that I do in my large bore routine, I will always do. I'll just like try to phonate it on my small trombone. Mm-hmm. I've gotten away from that like a lot. How much are you doing of like false tone stuff?
I play false tones on every cover band gig.
Really?
Yeah.
What song?
On I Want to Dance with Somebody.
Don't say Boogie Shoes.
No.
Oh.
No, I don't play false tones like low B naturals. Yeah, that sounds awful. But yeah, so I do it. We played an F, and then there's the bridge. Before we go to G, and it's like there's like
D minor.
Yeah, so it's like D minor, and then C. And so it's like I'll play D in the staff, and then I'll play like trigger D, and then I'll play trigger low C.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's just for my own enjoyment.
Nice.
But to answer your question,
cool. I bet that got like a raised eyebrow first time you did that.
I like it, and it's fun when the saxophone player plays fifths with me. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to convince him to, because on a saxophone concert low A, the fifth of D is that's their second to lowest note. That's fine. They can play it and they can honk it out. It sounds great. But then the low G,
you have to put the knee in.
Yeah, you have to put the knee in the bell, and he doesn't like to do that because he thinks it looks kind of silly. And it's like, I know that it looks silly, but just It's
It does
fun.
look silly. It's correct.
Yes, but it's fun. Brian says, what standard do you know that you bet most of your friends don't know? Oh, I can tell you that one. That one's really easy for me. I Should Care.
That's a good one.
That's always one that no one seems to know, even though it's not like it's hard or anything. It's just not. It's a deep cut.
Sure. That's a good one. I'm not good at those because I don't like obscure standards.
But you know more
like
standards than I do.
Yes, but I will never know more standards than my partner.
Yeah. Well,
She will
vocalist
always know more
tunes,
standards.
yeah.
But I know cool ones because of playing with her, like Fooling Myself, You Turn the Tables on Me, Let Me Love You, New York on Sunday. Like, we can get real weird with that. And it's like, it's all like really accessible, like 362, 5e sort of stuff. It's like, it's fun. And it's really refreshing.
362 5e? Is that a, I mean, I understand it, but.
Right. I mean, like, it's like kind of like very much cut from the Great American Songbook cloth in that the harmony's never gonna.
Yeah,
even
I mean,
if the key center shifts in a funny way,
right.
It's not gonna go anywhere weird. But yes, 362 5e.
Yeah, but you said
I
62.
added an extra e. Yeah, 362.
Which
didn't mean that.
Yeah, it's I thought that was a thing that I didn't. It's like.
No, just 362 5e.
But yeah, I mean, especially if you go with your kind of traditional definition of what standard means. It's like, is that Great American Songbook? Like, do you include tunes by jazz musicians without words? It's like,
I have recently, this might be I don't know if it's a regional thing or not, but there's a very distinct separation between jazz tunes and standards here in the Northwest. And that like to the point where like I try to go like full sets or entire gigs not playing a standard, where it's like we just play like they call this, we're playing jazz music, and there's like this like codification of like, okay, this is by a jazz musician, which implies like either a vocalist who does like creative art, like something like a vocalist who's written a tune outside of like the Great American Songbook. So it'd be later. It'd be like something post-bop, like 500 Miles High. I know I mentioned
right.
Korea, it's a bad example, but
yes,
like,
not from a musical.
Tunes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, I definitely.
So I don't know. That was new to me. I didn't know that like we were like.
I think that's one of those things.
So hardcore.
Right. Like some people it matters to. Some people, I definitely use a more loose definition of standard. Like I kind of include jazz tunes that I probably shouldn't, but like in my head there isn't a distinction. I just know that people make that distinction.
Right. It's kind of I was thinking about this today while I was making smoothies in my kitchen this afternoon. There's like this term that I heard recently of like someone who is chronically online, like maybe someone who spends too much time on the internet, and it's like if you're actually going to get upset about the difference between jazz tunes and jazz standards, the response would be go outside and touch the grass outside and just feel it for a bit. Like go get a drink of water.
Yeah.
You don't need to be upset.
Right. James says it was, I think this is going back to the Maynard Ferguson thing, the Chameleon. It was my teacher who played it. He came to a session not knowing there was such a low part and only brought a straight tenor from Ottawa, Montreal. Makes me practice false tones now. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting story. I wonder, is that in like the big, I can't remember, is that the big band Nouveau times? Like, is that like a small band? I'd have to.
I don't know.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of that sort of thing that can go on. That's why that's a perfect example of why I show up to every recording session with more horns than anyone thinks I would bring.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just can't fathom the idea of like getting caught without the instrument that I need. Mm-hmm. So I always have extra. I always have, like, if you tell me that it's a trombone thing, I definitely have tenor and bass. If I know it's a classical thing, maybe I'd bring my alto, but that I mostly don't want to play that. So it's fine. and tubas. You know, I'll probably bring both tubas. I might even bring euphonium. Like it's, you know, you never know how things might go in the studio, and I just like to be prepared. But I also live in a state where, you know, I can drive to most things. I'm not taking public transportation or something like that. That can throw a wrench in some stuff.
Yeah.
Brian asks, the hardest thing you've ever had to play. I think one of the hardest things that I've had to play, and I just think about it because it's like, it's a thing that I remember not being able to play at the time. And I played that piece again since, and I was able to play it. But there's a specific spot in a Michael Gandolfi piece called Vientos y Tangos. And there's just like a really unfortunate tuba part where it's like... I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like it's basically like a really fast basically lip trip. It's like a minor third from B to D, and it's just like, yeah, that just like, I couldn't do that when I was in high school, and it's like still it's just not a friendly thing for any tuba player, even now that I'm older.
Right.
It's still hard. Do you have a hardest thing? And then we should probably call it here pretty soon.
I have a couple, and I think they're good. The first one that like popped in my head immediately was Brahms 1, the trombone excerpt. That really quiet high thing. That one. Yep. Yes. That excerpt highlights all of the things that do not come natural to me in the trombone world. The first off being like a very characteristically classically beautiful orchestral trombone sound. That's hard for me. Like I can be like loud, ugly trombone, not all the time, but probably easier than beautiful, luxurious Brahms trombone chorale sound.
Right.
The second thing that's hard about that for me, it's just intonation in the high range when you're playing soft, and then like long sustained notes where my brain doesn't like at some point think, wow, you took a really big breath, or like my eyes start looking around, or I start thinking like the notes are long enough in that excerpt that I start thinking about what I had for lunch that day at some point. That's just, I can't focus for that long. And it's probably because I'm on the internet too much. I'm chronically online and I need to go feel the grass out in my yard.
There you go.
But that that one, I just like, I don't know if our trombone professor has ever looked more, is not the most disappointed that he's ever looking at me, like was playing that in excerpts class, but like definitely the most like confused. Like
didn't know you were so bad at that.
He didn't expect to. Right, like he learned something new about what I couldn't do on the trombone. And then like the worst thing about that day in trombone excerpts class was not like the criticism that he gave me. It was how much I could tell he was trying to be nice and like not hurt my feelings, because that's bad. If you know anything about our trombone professor at UNT, it's like he's really like if he's being nice to you about it, then something has gone horribly wrong and you need to go practice.
Right.
But yeah, that was really fun. I loved that class. My other one, hardest thing I've ever played, I would say like historically the hardest things that I've played are things that I've written for myself, or like things that people who are like really new to writing bring to me to play. And I think that's like a lot of fun to like try to get someone's like really gestural like get into the weeds and really figure out what works and what doesn't on like the trombone. Like sometimes it's just a matter of like we're in the wrong tessitura, or this is too fast with the trombone, or things like that. Even when I'm writing for myself, I do that all the time.
Right.
I think it's cool that like for my own writing, even now, like I consider myself kind of like a professional trombone player, but definitely a novice writer. And I like that I feel comfortable throwing things at people, and they're usually in environments where we're all comfortable saying like, we can make this work, or this is not cool. And I would encourage anybody who's listening that's like getting into writing to like find like a reading space. And whenever it's nerve-wracking to give your writing to somebody, especially if it's new, and especially if it's something that you think like, I'm really going for something, like it's something like kind of advantageous, or it's a big project. But like throw it at your peers and then allow them to say like, I can't do that, without feeling like they're going to hurt your feelings, because of course they aren't, you know what I mean? Right. But it's like having that open communicating channel of openness when you're learning how to write, I think is super important. So that's kind of tangential, unrelated thing to like hard music, but something that I noticed is like the most difficult stuff is usually like new, like pieces of music that my peers are writing that are like almost final products, you know?
Yeah.
So there you go.
So final question, do you play long tones? Why or why not? I do some, not as much as some people. And I think that it can be helpful, but I don't think that it's everything.
I see. I have the opposite answer. At the moment right now, I'm doing a lot of long tones. Like that is like primarily what I'm doing in my maintenance is like I'm doing long tones explicitly, or I'm catering my other exercises to also have like a long tone element to them, just as an experiment right now, because I was to be very specific. It's just I'm a big fan of DeMondre Thurman's playing. I know that DeMondre Thurman has talked in online master classes about his personal long tone circuit that he does. So I'm trying it out and incorporating versions of it into other exercises, kind of interspersed throughout my day. And it's something that like I always kind of with my concentration issue, it's one of those things that I would start and I never really committed the time. Like when I was putting my case away many days in undergrad and grad school, like it was like I did enough practicing and I was covering my bases, but I knew in the back of my mind I didn't do as much long tones as the idyllic trombone player that I think of in my head, like the perfect student.
Right.
And so I'm trying right now to go back and kind of like keep that time sacred and like keep it really special for me and always devote some time to it in my practicing. And I'm just trying to see what it would be like. And so far, like while I don't notice any immediate changes in my tone quality, it's become a nice thing that I look forward to doing in the morning. I like doing my tones. I don't think my partner enjoys me doing my tones because they're really, really loud some days, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying it out right now. Big fan of the long tones. Even if I don't get anything out of it, it's like it's a nice fun thing to do to start my practicing. That's like you're just knocking it out of the park and you feel like $1,000,000 because you've done your tones for the day. It's cool.
Yeah. Well,
it's
cool.
refreshing.
Well, let's call it there, and I think next week we should be back on Wednesday, right? I think so.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. But yeah, so thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Not the same time, different day, but same channel. Cool.
That's right.
All right, we'll catch everybody later.
All right, see y'all.
Cool. I've had to go to the bathroom.